So Kentucky is celebrating right now. They're calling it a win because Canada dropped the reciprocal tariffs. And according to them, this is a big step forward to save their bourbon industry. But here's my opinion. I don't think this changes anything at all. Today I have a video out of Kentucky where they're pushing the idea that Canada should put bourbon back on the shelves. It's the same old story, a very me perspective, which is nothing new out of the US. I'll also briefly touch on another report where Prime Minister Mark Carney just signed a critical minerals deal with Germany. And that, to me, is a positive sign that Canada is starting to untangle itself from relying so heavily on the US. Before we dive in, today's backdrop was sent to us by Wade, one of our viewers on Blue Sky. He didn't mention where in Saskatchewan this was taken, but it's a beautiful shot of our prairies. Thanks for sending this in, Wade. All right, let's get into this report on Kentucky.
Canada is rolling back its retaliatory tariffs on bourbon right down to zero. Industry leaders are now applauding the move, but they warn it's just a first step toward getting bourbon back on Canadian shelves, an important market. Today, our senior reporter, Isaiah Kim Martinez, has been talking with players at all levels about this. Isaiah?
Well, Kentucky distilleries export bourbon to Canada more than any other single country. But over the last few months, much of that product has just been sitting there, not being sold in the stores. So there's hope now this latest move will mend the wounds of that fractured relationship.
Yeah, maybe for you in the United States, but the damage that the United States has caused to Canada, and quite frankly, the rest of the world, isn't going to heal overnight. Those wounds are going to take generations, Mr. Reporter.
Republican Senator Rand Paul talks to business leaders in Louisville, making it clear his stance on tariffs and their impact on bourbon has not changed. Can you give us a tangible example of how tariffs have hit the bourbon industry based on CEOs you've spoken with?
It's worse than just the tariffs. Tariffs would just be adding a cost to Kentucky bourbon. In Canada, they're just not ordering it. They've got whole shelves where they're not serving it.
But Kentucky Distillers Association President Eric Gregory believes there's new light at the end of the tunnel.
We're very pleased that leaders in Alberta and Saskatchewan have restored American alcohol, especially Kentucky bourbon, to the shelves.
Well, of course you're happy. Now your product is back on the shelves in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and you can start filling up your bottom line again. But here's the major thing that you're missing. Even if the alcohol is available, Canadians are still choosing not to buy your bourbon. Sure, you might get a few bottles here and there that sell, but the vast majority of Canadians, including me, the wounds are way too deep to spend money on your crappy bourbon.
And now we're just hopeful that other provinces will follow suit.
Gregory is applauding the move by the Canadian Prime Minister to remove several of the tariffs they fired back at America after President Trump first imposed import taxes on them.
Canada is our biggest export country. We send about $100 million worth of spirits, most of which is bourbon, there every year. So if we can figure out a way to get negotiations started again, then that's good for everybody.
No, that might be good for you, but it's not good for Canada. And it's not good for everybody else either. You see, Mr. Bourbon Guy, this isn't some big win for everybody, because even if your bourbon is back on the shelves, your country's leader is still acting like a man-child to the rest of the world. And let's be realistic here. There's probably never going to be an apology for the disrespect that came from your president or the 77 million who voted for them, which I'm even guessing you're probably one of them as well. So don't try to gaslight us into thinking that this is a great step forward for everyone, because the only person you're thinking about is yourself. If I sound fired up today, it's because this report just screams America's me mentality. And ever since my interview with R, I really started noticing it a lot more. And now it's just something I can't unsee.
Gregory believes Canada ending these tariffs opens the door for a new long-term trade deal, what Trump has been wanting from the start.
We're not all the way there yet because there's still provinces, and it happens to be two of the biggest provinces that have not yet put us back on the shelves.
Bob Houselayden is a former Brown-Forman executive, now a professor at U of L.
What they own that they took off the shelves, they own. They can't give it back. So they're going to have to put it back on the shelves eventually. The question is, are they going to hold out for a while?
Actually, no, Mr. Professor Guy. We don't have to put it back on the shelves, like you arrogantly assume we do. In fact, Quebec is going to destroy your liquor. It's not going to go to consumers. And chances are, we won't be buying more of it either. So take that arrogant assumption and shove it. I told you I was fired up today.
So, Isaiah, what about this disconnect? We keep seeing Louisville's tourism business is based so much on bourbon tourism now. Hotels are full. Right now, as we speak, there's a new operation being built out in a 1925 building in the Nulu neighborhood called Binder's Stash. The construction crews are in there now.
Well, Doug, they keep opening. The distilleries keep opening, even despite the fact that sales are dropping in a lot of different places across the state. The bottom line here is, for many people, you don't have to drink it to want to be a part of the experience. And Louisville Tourism saying they're actually doubling down on that here in Louisville. They will have 25 bourbon experiences open, they're expecting, by the end of this year. That's in downtown alone.
Even with the slumping sales. Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you.
Well, bourbon experience or not, one thing's for sure. You won't have Canadians experiencing it. So what does this mean for us? Sure, the tariffs might be lifted on U.S. alcohol, but Canadians still have a choice not to buy it, even if it's sitting on the store shelves. I hope our provincial governments continue to leave it off the shelves. That would send a strong message. But even if it does come back after a while, we as Canadians still have the power to ignore it and let it collect dust. As for me, if bourbon never showed up on the BC shelves again, I'd never buy it for the rest of my life. All right, that's it for this report. I'm done with it. The next one is actually a more positive story for Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney has just signed a critical minerals deal with Germany. And I have to say, this one makes me happy.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was welcomed to Berlin Tuesday morning by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz and Carney just got their top jobs earlier this spring. Carney, of course, elected in April, Merz in May. One's a liberal, one's a small C conservative, but they really both campaigned on essentially a similar message, promising quick action on the economy and strengthening security relationships.
Countries like Germany, Canada, the partnership with the European Union can provide stability and prosperity for our citizens.
And so, after about an hour and a half or so of meetings, both men emerged to say they've got some deals done. First, Canada and Germany are going to have signed a critical minerals partnership that will see Canadian critical minerals produced and developed for export markets. Second, Canada and Germany say they're going to get serious about finding ways to export Canadian liquefied natural gas to German markets.
Now, trade, tariff, and politics, none of these are my strengths. But I do know when something's moving in the right direction. Canada needs to start building partnerships with other countries for everything: minerals, military, food, produce, liquefied gas, you name it. Because right now, our major trading partner is being run like a circus. And even after Trump is gone, the US cannot be trusted. We already know 77 million of his followers aren't going anywhere. They're only getting louder, the mask is off, and now we know who the right side really is. So I'm glad Canada is signing a deal with Germany. And I hope we see more deals with other countries moving forward.
Details TBD. But the big commercial and defense news of the day was all about submarines. The Royal Canadian Navy is in the market right now for 12 new subs. And Canada announced today that it has narrowed down the potential bidders or suppliers for those subs to two companies. One in South Korea, a Hanwha Ocean Company, and the other a German-Norwegian consortium headed up by ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems. Canada is not buying nuclear submarines, but both the German-Norwegian consortium and the Koreans, they can build the type of submarine that can still stay submerged underwater for 21 days. You got to have that if you're going to operate under Arctic ice, using a combination of diesel and battery power. Canada's also asking both these manufacturers, you got to make sure you build these subs so that they can fire ballistic missiles.
Now, this is just me thinking out loud, but if Canada is buying 12 submarines, they have to be able to fire ballistic missiles and be ready for war. Hopefully, we'll never need to use them. But the days of assuming the US will cover us or step in to protect Canada or even assist Canada, those days are over. So with that in mind, Canada has to make sure that our military and our assets are ready to defend this country and our allies. Because right now, our neighbor's government is drunk at the wheel. And one day, those stray bullets could end up coming north. Now, some of you might think I'm exaggerating. And honestly, I hope I am. But ask yourself this. Would you rather be caught off guard or be prepared if that day ever came? Let me know what you think. Am I being overly paranoid or do you agree with me?
Now, Canada right now has just 4 submarines, all of them bought from the British, used back in 1998. And those subs are going to have to be decommissioned in 2035. And that's a relatively narrow window in defense procurement terms. So Canada needs to pull the trigger quickly to choose between the Germans or the South Koreans for these subs. Now, one of the conditions of the contract Canada will sign is this. This is going to be one of the biggest procurement projects ever in Canadian military history. It could be $25 billion. And whatever Canada spends, Canada will require the winning bidder to invest back into Canada, most likely in the form of supply contracts, maintenance contracts, or parts contracts. David Akin, Global News, Berlin.
Now, to me, that actually sounds like a fair deal for everyone. Not like the Bourbon guy who said everyone, but really only means himself in the United States. Making the clause that the winning bidder has to invest in Canada, that's huge. It's going to boost our own economy, while at the same time, we fund the winning bidder's country for the submarines. Now compare that to Trump's so-called deals, which only ever benefit him and his administration, and not even his own citizens. So who in their right mind would want to make a deal with the United States right now? Didn't Trump say he would have 90 deals in 90 days or something like that? Yeah, I wonder how that's going. Anyways, Prime Minister Mark Carney will also be in Poland and Latvia to discuss trade deals on this same trip, and I'll be interested to see what comes out of it. I have confidence in Prime Minister Mark Carney that he will make the best deal for Canada and also for our allies as well. Now, this next video is more of a funny one. It compares our Prime Minister Mark Carney to the clown sitting in the White House.
And it's poignant to do so in Sofia Square, the location of so many of Ukraine's battles for liberty and celebrations of the freedom that you have won.
There's your trophy for the World Cup. In fact, it's solid gold. That's actually solid gold, so heavy that some of the people in this room wouldn't be able to lift it up. I think what I'm going to do is place it right above the angel, right over there. That's solid gold, too. We're going to put it right up there. Look at that. There's a solid gold trophy. They know how to get to me, you know.
Mr. President, dear friends, my message today is simple. Canada will always stand in solidarity with Ukraine.
I know who I would rather have as my leader, and I'm pretty sure everyone watching this knows the answer too. Canada has never felt more patriotic than it has this year. The only other time I can remember was during the 2010 Olympics, when Canada won the gold medal. Of course, we still have our own internal Canada haters. And if they hate this country so much, I wish they would just leave. Canada has its issues, just like every other country out there. But even with those problems, we are far better off than many places around the world. For me personally, I mentioned before that I did live overseas for a few years in a developing country. And those years really opened up my eyes. They made me realize how much I should appreciate the country I was born in. I'm going to close this video with a clip I shared before. It's a good reminder for our new subscribers who haven't seen it yet of what we should never take for granted. If you found this video helpful, a like and subscribe would help this channel reach more people, and share it with your friends as well. I hope to see you in the next video, and I'll leave you all with this final clip from Yahtzee Runs.
I ran past this Canadian flag over here, and amidst all the hate that Canada's getting, there's a few words that I did want to say. 25 years ago, my family came to this country. We came here because that flag and that country was the only one that would take us. The only one that would take us from the aftermath of a bloody war, living as refugees in the basement of a shitty apartment building. This is the only country that took us in. I may not be born here, but I am Canadian. And you should be proud to be a Canadian. There isn't many countries like this. In the midst of all the bullshit that we are going through, and yes, it's hard. But I don't think most of you know what real hard is. Just count yourselves lucky. All right? Just count yourselves lucky. That's it.